All right, let me turn to our guest. Please have a seat, and please, take the stage. And we're very pleased to have with us today Catherine Russell, the Executive Director of the UN Children's Fund, who just got back a few days ago from Haiti. Over to you.
Thank you. Do I need to? It's on. Okay, great. Well, thank you all very much. And Farhan, thank you so much. I got to listen to your briefing. I hear what you do every day, so it's challenging. I'm going to read a statement and then take some questions. So last week, I traveled to Haiti as the UNICEF Executive Director, but also in this new capacity I have as the Principal Advocate for Haiti for the Interagency Standing Committee, which, as all of you probably know, is a group of humanitarians, both UN agency folks and outsiders, designated by Martin Griffiths, who asked me to lead the Haiti effort. I came to listen, to learn, and to help galvanize attention and support for the humanitarian response in Haiti. While there, I met up with Cindy McCain, Executive Director of World Food Program, and that was fantastic for us to be together, to highlight our joint work and to send a shared message that Haiti is truly becoming a forgotten crisis. I'd visited Haiti once before, in 2010, with then First Lady Michelle Obama and our current First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, after the devastating January 12th earthquake, which left millions in need of humanitarian assistance. Upon my return to the country last week, it was with the knowledge that there are now even more Haitian people in need than ever before. Today, an estimated 5.2 million people, or close to half the entire population, require humanitarian assistance, and this includes nearly 3 million children. Critically, the institutions and services that children rely on are barely functional. Resources are in short supply, and violent armed groups control over 60% of Haiti's capital and large parts of the country's primary agricultural areas. Meanwhile, international solidarity and support for Haiti has largely faded away in the years since the 2010 earthquake. I don't have to tell all of you journalists, you know the headlines from Haiti all too well. Haitians and our team there tell me it's never been worse than it is now. Unprecedented hunger and malnutrition, grinding poverty, a crippled economy, resurgence of cholera, and a massive insecurity that creates a deadly downward spiral of violence. While, of course, flooding and earthquakes continue to remind us all just how vulnerable Haiti is to climate change and natural disasters. UNICEF and our UN and NGO partners are deeply concerned about the thousands of children caught up in the crossfire of violent clashes or recruited and used by the armed groups. In some communities, there are staggering levels of gender-based violence, and rape is being used as a weapon for intimidation and control. When I visited a center for survivors of gender-based violence located in one of the most dangerous parts of Port-au-Prince, an 11-year-old girl told me in the softest of voices that 5 men had grabbed her off the street. 3 of the men raped her. She was 8 months pregnant when we spoke and gave birth just a few days later. One woman told me that armed men had barged into her house and raped her. She said her 20-year-old sister resisted so strongly that they killed her by setting her on fire. Then they burned down the house. 3 other women shared very similar stories of rape, one in front of her children, and then having their houses burned to the ground. I was told this is a part of a new strategy by the armed groups. They rape girls and women and they burn their homes to make them more vulnerable and more easily controlled. Because if they break the women, they've broken the foundation of the communities. But amid the horror was also some hope. I met a really wonderful doctor, Jean-William Pop and Dr. Marie Deschamps, and they're really amazing staff who face adversity every day to help survivors of rape and violence rebuild their lives. Doctor pointed out one of his staff people who had been abducted, maybe a month or so ago by one of the groups, and he had negotiated her release. So I think it's something that they constantly live with. I met a woman named Stephanie, a displaced young woman who's a community leader taking care of other displaced women and children. And that was at a camp, not really a camp, but a site for IDPs that was just heartbreaking to see people just all on top of each other. They pointed to a group of little children. I think they said 30 children had been dropped off from an orphanage and just left there with no one to care for them. So I think the situation is quite devastating. I met teachers and health workers who are braving the dangers of the streets to show up to work for children every day to educate and care for the children in the country. And I met boys and girls in the school who told me they loved being in class and learning, so that was the bright spot of the trip for sure. They told me they wanted to be nurses, business owners, and doctors, including one girl who said she wanted to be a pediatrician. I met a 13-year-old girl named Serafina who told me she picked doctor as a profession because she said, I love when people take care of other people. I tell you that because wherever I go, I see that children still somehow hold on to the shreds of being children, and that is really heartening, especially in situations like that. These children are what the parents of Haiti are pinning their hopes on, and we should be doing the same. I'm so proud of our humanitarian colleagues, most of them Haitians themselves, who shared with me some of the challenges they face. Many have had to move their homes, some multiple times, to find safety from the violence and kidnappings for ransom. But they also told me of triumphs of bringing food, nutrition, health care, safe water, and a level of protection to the people in need. The humanitarian system, including UNICEF, is managing to deliver in Haiti, and we're scaling up our response, but we're far from meeting the growing needs of the Haitian people. At a bare minimum, we must have $720 million UN humanitarian response plan for 2023 funded. Right now, we've received less than a quarter of what we need. So overall, there are some specific and urgent steps we must take, and these include the following. 1, providing immediate humanitarian funding and a better response to meet the acute needs of the most vulnerable. 2, ensuring a sustained and coordinated humanitarian effort that is coupled with longer-term solutions to rebuild institutions, ensure access to basic services, restore hope, and try to build resilience. 3, undertaking preparedness and resilience building for the inevitable natural disasters and epidemics that we expect will come. 4, protecting humanitarian actors and humanitarian space. And 5, encouraging and supporting the government to do a better job engaging with the people of Haiti, from the impacted communities to those who have influence, to stop the violence. The international community must also support government efforts to strengthen the Haitian National Police and the justice system. The current situation of insecurity is truly unacceptable. Women and children are dying. Schools and public spaces that should be safe spaces are not. Collectively, the world is failing the Haitian people, and unless we take immediate action, it's hard to imagine a decent future for the population there. We must restore trust and be better at listening to what the Haitian people say they need. When I asked Serafina, our young doctor in the making, just that question, she said, I would tell the international community, tell them to love the country, and then the country will be fine. So, from the voice of a child, a somewhat hopeful plea. So thanks so much, and happy to take your questions.
That's a good note to segue into this. Yeah, Edie.
Thank you very much on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. The new UN human rights expert for Haiti, William O'Neill, finished up his first visit 10 days yesterday. And he said that a specialized international force is needed to help fight gang violence in Haiti, and that a weapons embargo should be implemented immediately. Are those calls that you would support, having seen what you did during your visit?
Well, thank you, Edie. It's nice to meet you. I've heard so much about you. It's nice to meet you in person. I think the Secretary General also has proposed a rapid action force. I mean, what was clear to me there is that something needs to change, right? It cannot go on the way it is. I think that ultimately, what the UN does is up to the member states, and if individual, countries decide to do something, that's up to them. But I would say that it's imperative that something change there. And I don't think, based on what I saw, that the police there have the capacity on their own to do what they need to do to secure the country and protect the population. I would say if there is any kind of a force, we always, as humanitarians, want to make sure that they don't contribute to the problem, right? That they act in a way that respects the humanitarian concerns and needs of the population. But honestly, Edie, I don't see how it can continue the way it is without some help to the very beleaguered forces that are there.
Pam?
Thank you very much for the briefing. Also, it's Pamela Falk from CBS News. a bit of a follow-up on what's next. You have said Haiti is on the precipice. We've seen the Security Council does not have an appetite for any kind of a multinational force. And yet, that may be because U.S., France, UN all have a bit of a tragic history with those forces in Haiti. The question is, did you and Cindy McCain, the AD of WFP, putting heads together, you've been in the Biden White House, there's an uptick in Haitians coming in boats to the United States. What can you do short of a multinational force? I mean, you mentioned a few other things, but how do you stop this from becoming a failed state? Or maybe it already is.
Well, it's certainly close. I think that the reason Cindy and I went together was quite intentional and purposeful, which was to say, from the UN perspective, we're trying to combine resources, and we also really want to bring attention to the problem here, because I think it's becoming such a forgotten crisis, and I think that's in part because of what you say, which is that there have been efforts there in the past that have not been particularly successful for a whole number of reasons. I mean, it is a country that I think has had some lots of bad things, including some bad luck, for sure. But I think that we have to, as an international community, say we can't watch this country completely fall apart. And so my job is to try to bring some attention to that problem and to make sure people understand how terrible the humanitarian crisis is, what kind of impact that's having on children. You mentioned people leaving in boats, but there are also just so many people leaving, and people in the country were talking to me about this a lot, about the brain drain of people who can get out or getting out. And it's really creating a challenge even for the UN staff. I mean, people who are able to are trying to get out because it's just it's frightening for people there. And this, danger of being abducted and, the harshness of the violence there, burnings and other terrible things that are extraordinary even, by the usual measures that we see. So I think, from my perspective, the most important thing is to try to draw attention to it, to remind people that, yes, it has been a frustrating place, but we can't leave it behind, right? It's in our hemisphere here, right? We need to pay attention to it, and we need to try to do what we can to help the people, and I hope I can bring some attention to that challenge.
Thank you.
Sure.
James?
James Bays from Al Jazeera. Executive Director, in terms of the activities of the gangs and the violence on the ground, how difficult is it for the aid community, for humanitarian actors to do their job? How are you getting aid around? Are you having to airlift aid? Can you just give us some idea of the measures you're having to make and the threats to the humanitarian community as they do their jobs?
I mean, you're pointing out a really good issue, and I think, it points to how committed and skilled these humanitarian workers are, because I mentioned the facility I went to where I met with these two doctors, and it was in a place between two gangs, essentially, and there was a lot of concern, could I go, could I not go? But of course, our teams on the ground worked with the doctors and then talked to the gangs and said, you need to let this happen. And so I think there's a lot of that, a lot of work of us trying to negotiate our way around, trying to work with these gangs so that we can get access. But it's for somebody in my position, it's so nerve-wracking, because I worry so much about our teams, and I admire their courage, but I hate to think that they're risking their lives to do the work. But the reality is it's just a very difficult situation, and there are a lot of weapons in the country. A lot of weapons have come into the country. A lot of people have weapons, and I think it's unnerving, because it's now what's happening is you have gangs or armed groups. I think I was told not to call them gangs, which of course I'm doing, but they have armed groups, and then they have this sort of phenomenon of the vigilantes coming into play, because the population is afraid and they're trying to strike back. So it's just violence every which way, and it's very concerning. This is what I'm saying about the humanitarian situation, that needs are so extraordinary. I mean, children who are suffering from severe malnutrition, cholera, all these horrible things happening. We need to be able to get in to help these people, but it's very challenging given the violence.
I think last time we were briefed by the humanitarian coordinator, we were told that some supplies did have to go by airlift. Do you have enough airlift capability in the
James, I don't know the answer to that. I would imagine that UNICEF, actually, it would probably be WFP that's moving things around, yeah. But I would imagine we're doing everything we can. And there are parts of the country where it's easier to work, but there are parts, as I said, Port-au-Prince is 60% controlled by the gangs. And this other region that I'm looking at Milan because I can never remember the name of it, but a region where they call it like the breadbasket of the country, where so much of the agriculture has been done. Because somebody was making the point earlier in a briefing that it used to be that Haiti was, they have a lot of resources in terms of agriculture and that they were able to support themselves, and now, of course, they cannot because of the violence.
Michelle?
Thank you. Michelle Nichols from
Hi,
Reuters.
Michelle.
Thanks for the briefing. Just a follow-on from that, actually. Did people talk to you about these sort of so-called self-defense groups that are popping up, and whether they're helping, hindering, making it worse, what the situation is there? And then just in relation to, you said negotiations with gangs, like how many of them are kind of reasonable enough, I guess, to negotiate with?
Yeah.
And given that, with regard to a multinational force, there appears to have been quite a bit of interest and people willing to contribute, but no one's taking the lead, which seems to be what's holding this up. Are you concerned that the Haitian government might look to other avenues, such as paying mercenary groups to come in and help them? Are there any signs that that could happen?
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that. I do think that the country is desperate to get some help. I would be surprised if they did that. I'm not sure they have the resources to do it. But it's clear that, this phenomenon of the vigilantes is clearly a response by the population, right, to try to take back some measure of security. I heard very mixed things about that. In some cases, people are saying, well, it's a little bit calmer than it has been. But, I think people recognize that it also has its own challenges, and somebody was describing to me that, it can be a situation where your neighbor says, oh, she's part of the gangs, and then, there's no due process, let's put it that way. And, right, to have people, sort of gunned down on the street or burned to death without any sort of process is a nerve-wracking situation for everybody. But the interesting thing I saw was that, Cindy and I visited a school together, and the kids, somebody pointed this out to me, especially the little girls, they all had their hair done in these beautiful braids and bows, and they had these beautiful little uniforms on, and it just reminded me how much parents want to preserve some normalcy in a situation like that. So they have to go to school, and God knows, if they have to go past gangs to get there, but the population's trying to hold on to that a bit, and I think we're trying to help. But there's no question that there needs to be an overall solution here, that the government doesn't seem to have the capacity to do what they need to do. The police force cannot get control of it. So the vigilantes, I understand why it happens, but I can't say that increasing violence is really anything better than what we've had.
Yes, please. Yes, you.
Thank you, Madam Edie. Martin Wang from Xinhua. So actually, it's very interesting that one of my friends is running for the president in Haiti. So each time he visits in communities, he tries to bring some school bags, pencil boxes, and sort of. So in this case, we could see that the Haitian children are in very bad need of some very basic things. So my question is, how is UNICEF, working to ensure their continued access to some essential services, including healthcare, education, and psychosocial support in Haiti? Yeah, thank you.
It's a good question. It goes to exactly what we're trying to do, which is deal with a whole range of challenges. As I said, the food needs are tremendous, and the nutrition needs. And for children suffering from severe malnutrition, again, that shouldn't be happening in a place like Haiti. The gender-based violence, the sort of return of cholera, which that is a terrible situation. And so we're trying to provide wash facilities. We're providing therapeutic feeding for the children who are suffering from severe malnutrition. We're providing services, psychosocial services. That's some of what I saw at that hospital that was dealing with these women who had been raped, and the young woman, 11-year-old who was 8 months pregnant. It's just heartbreaking to see that. So we're providing social services for people, but honestly, it's, I'm not saying it's a finger in the dike, but it feels a little bit like that because the needs are so extraordinary. We're not funded as well as we should be on this, which, is consistent with the other humanitarian appeals, right? They're all low, and I think somebody described it to me as there's just not a lot of bandwidth because there's so much attention to all these different humanitarian problems, and they keep increasing and not decreasing. So we're trying, and I think, I'm always happy to see what UNICEF is able to do. It always makes me feel slightly better, but the overall situation is just terrible and very challenging.
Thank you. On the screen, Abdul Hamid.
Oh, I didn't see the screen.
Thank you, Executive Director. This is Abdul Hamid Sayan from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. And I want to ask your permission to ask you about the report just released on Monday about children in armed conflict, if you allow me to ask outside the issue of Haiti.
Let's go through the Haiti questions first, since this is focused on that, and then we'll see whether she has time for other ones.
Yeah, and can I just say, first of all, I'm always happy to answer any questions, and you should call me tomorrow and happy to answer that. I do, the reason that I would like to focus on Haiti now is because it's getting so little attention, and so I'd rather not get distracted from that, but you can definitely call later my office or call me tomorrow, and I'm happy to talk to you about that.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
All right. Evelyn?
Yes, thank you.
Hey, Evelyn.
Evelyn Leopold, glad to finally meet you.
Thanks, you too.
I've known all your predecessors.
Ah.
Have you dealt with the United States returning to Haiti asylum seekers that have landed in Florida?
Mm-hmm.
I think the last one, I think, was nearly 27,000
Yeah.
that they returned, and they might listen to you.
The interesting thing is I see displaced people all around the world, and the one thing that's always striking to me is that nobody ever wants to leave their home. They leave because they feel like they have no choice, and it's heartbreaking to see that. It's heartbreaking to see it in this situation and so many others that I've seen, and I think it's the most important thing that the international community can do is to try to settle this country down. And I think that, as I said, I heard a lot about the brain drain and about doctors and teachers and others leaving, not because they want to, but because it's so violent there. So I think the most important thing we can do is to try to restore some semblance of peace so that people can live there and start to chart a future that's better for them and for their children, because what's happening now is just not a tenable long-term solution.
Deji?
Yes, Deji Xu with China Central Television, Executive Director. According to your description, I just want to know what's the analysis from UNICEF about the trajectory of Haiti if the situation continues like this, especially for children? And you just mentioned 5, if not 6 points how to help. What would be the priority for UNICEF?
Well, look, I think that the trajectory, it's sort of an old saying, but humanitarians are optimistic people, so I'm optimistic that things can get better, but they're not going to get better without some effort by the international community, either supporting or doing more to try to quell the violence. I think there's no question about that. Right now, the Haitian government, and really it's the police force, just does not have the capacity to do it. So I don't think, I can't see any scenario where the violence just stops. I think it's going to be, somebody has to make it stop.
So you think to stop the violence would be the most important thing?
Absolutely, no question about that. And look, that involves a lot of things. Part of the challenge here is the capacity of the government is not strong enough, right? We need to work on building up the capacity and helping to do that. And of course, we need to deal with the humanitarian problems. And I think, the humanitarian problems are, we always try to build in the development as a piece of the humanitarian, but the needs now are so tremendous that it's just trying to keep people alive is our top priority. But we can't just do that, because otherwise it'll never get better. We really have to try to hope that there is a better political solution for the people who live there.
And last question, we'll turn to the screens one more time. Iftikhar?
Thank you, Farhan. Thank you, Mr. Russell. My name is Iftikhar Ali from Associated Press of Pakistan. And another question outside the Haitian situation. May I ask you about the situation of Afghan children? How are your efforts to improve their lot? Thank you very much.
As is the case with Abdul Hamid, we'll try to put you in touch with Malin in the UNICEF office, so you can then send questions after this briefing, which is focused on Haiti. Thanks, Iftikhar. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
And if there are no further questions on Haiti, then I'd like once more to thank our guest, Catherine Russell. Thanks so much for this briefing.
And thanks to all of you for
And
paying
thanks to all-
attention, because it needs some attention, so thank you for doing that.
And
It's so nice to meet you.
Paulina Kubiak is up next.